Hello everyone, this video will be learning chapter 5 lesson 1 which is about perpendicular and angle bisectors. So by now you will definitely have an idea what are perpendicular bisectors, and also the word bisector, which you have used more often. Definitely you will know what the meaning of bisectors are. Also, bisector is a line which would divide an angle or a line in two equal parts. Bi means two, so sect means part. So two equal parts is what's meant by bisectors. I think before I explain what are perpendicular and angle bisectors, already you know now what is this lesson going to be. Now, when a point is the same distance from two or more objects, the point is said to be equidistant from the objects. Equi means equal, distance means the distance between two things. So equal distance, you know, if something is equal distance from each other means definitely both of them will have the same distance. Triangle congruence theorems can be used to prove theorems about equidistant points. Now, you might be wondering why we are learning all these theorems, why this many theorems? But in reality, these theorems are just for you to give an idea how these things work. But once you start practicing and you know what you need to do, then these theorems go nowhere. Like the theorems are basically just to give you a first idea how these things are established, because theorems are already something which have been established in math, right? So really you do not need to memorize all these theorems, you just need to understand them, right? So to start with, the first two theorems you have is perpendicular bisector theorem and the converse of perpendicular bisector theorem. Now, what is perpendicular bisector theorem? If a point is on the perpendicular bisector of a segment, so perpendicular bisector are the two lines which cross each other to make exact right angles. So a perpendicular bisegment will look like this. There are two lines which cross and they make exact right angles. They make four right angles. This is called a perpendicular bisector, right? So a perpendicular bisector theorem is a point on the perpendicular bisector. If a point is on the perpendicular bisector of a segment, then it is equidistant from the endpoints of the segment. So here we say that XY and AB are perpendicular bisectors. You can see that they have crossed to form right angles. So what happens is YA, that's the distance between YA, is congruent to the distance between YB. So they are equidistant. So as a result of this perpendicular bisegment and this equidistant, the next thing to be proven is XA is equal to XB. So from the endpoints also the distances are equal. The converse of perpendicular bisector theorem says the other way around. What does that say? If a point is equidistant from the endpoints, so if it is XA is equal to XB, then it is on the perpendicular bisector of a segment. Converse means you're just flipping the sentence. That's all. So here they said if a point is on the perpendicular bisector, then AX and XB are equal from the endpoints. But here they are saying if the endpoints have the same length, then there is a perpendicular bisector segment point. That's all. So when I do this example, it will be more clear for you what you needed to do. So let's get started with this example. Given that line L is the perpendicular bisector of DE, so that means the distance from D to F and F to E is equal, and the distance from D to G and E to G are equal. This is what the perpendicular bisector theorem says, right? So you know now very well what you needed to do. This is what the theorem is about. So EG is 14.6. So they said EG is 14.6. You need to find DG. So according to the perpendicular bisector theorem, if a point is there, that means the endpoints are going to be equidistant. So if this is 14.6, DG is also going to be 14.6. No calculations, you don't need to do anything. It's as simple as that. Right, so let's look at part B. What is part B saying? Given that DE, so the distance, the complete distance is 20.8. So from D to E, it is 20.8. You know that this distance D to F and F to E is equal. So DG is 36.4. So this is 36.4. EG is also 36.4. Naturally, that becomes 36.4 because of the bisector. Find EF. So they just want you to find only this part. Now, even without you knowing the theorems, out of common sense, if I would say, if you know the whole length of something and something has been divided in two parts, to find one part, you will divide it by 2. So the same thing we are going to do here. The distance from D to E is 20.8. So we need to find half of it. So to find half of it, we are going to divide 20.8 by 2. That will give you 10.4, which is equal to EF. So the distance between E to F is 10.4, which means the distance from D to F is also going to be 10.4. If you want to find the whole length, you will add 10.4 and 10.4. That's about perpendicular and angle bisectors. This is perpendicular bisector. So let me take you through to angle bisector now. Okay, now what does the angle bisector theorem say? If a point is on the bisector of an angle, now that was talking about lines, this is talking about angles. That means the same. I mean, they have the same idea, only the words are different here. So if a point is on the bisector of an angle, then it is equidistant from the sides of an angle. So here you can see angle APC is congruent to angle BPC. So what happens when these two angles become congruent? The distance from A to C equals BC. So these two distances are equal when the angle has been bisected. So the other way, converse of the angle bisector theorem says if a point in the interior of an angle is equidistant from the sides of the angle, then it is on the bisector of a triangle. So if AC is equal to BC, that means angle APC is equal to angle BPC. Same, but the other way. Here they say if APC is equal to CPB, then AC is equal to BC. Here they are saying if AC is equal to BC, then APC is congruent to BPC. That's all. Let's look at an example now. Given that YW is the bisects angle XYZ. So this is an angle bisector because they're talking about angles. And WZ is 3.05. So WZ, the length of WZ is 3.05. Find WX. So according to the angle bisector theorem, what does that say? If an angle has been bisected, the distance are going to be equal. So which means WX is also going to be 3.05. Next question, given that the measure of angle WYZ is 63 degrees. So which angle? WYZ. This angle is 63 and XW is 5.7. So XW is going to be WX. This one is going to be 5.7. And ZW, of course, is going to be 5.7. So this is the converse of the angle bisector theorem. Find the measure of angle XYZ. So they want you to find the measure of angle XYZ. So which means this complete angle they want you to find out. So this angle only they said is 63 degrees. So to find out the other angle, you know, if this is 63 degrees, the other side is also going to be 63 degrees. So to find the complete angle, you need to add 63 degrees plus 63 degrees, which is going to give you 126 degrees. So the measure of angle XYZ is going to be 126 degrees. Right, so let's keep this in mind and let's move on to the practice workbook questions. So here they say giving you a situation and asking you the reason. Diana is in an archery competition. She stands at A. So this is Diana. And her target is at D. So she needs to shoot here. Her competitors stand at B and C. So they just gave you the idea where their competitors are. They also need to shoot to D, right? The distance from each of her competitor to her target is equal. So the distance from each of her competitor to her target. So to the target from the competitors, it's the same distance. explain whether the flight path of Diana's arrow AD must be a perpendicular bisector of BC. So they're asking, do you think if Diana's arrow, if she's shooting it straight, does that need to be a perpendicular bisector for BC? Do you think so? Now, in which way do you need to think really depends on how you are thinking. But now that you know the theorems, you can give one of the reasons. Now, the reason what I would explain is the flight path of Diana's arrow does not have to be a perpendicular one. Why? It doesn't have to be a perpendicular of BC, bisector of BC, because if that becomes true, then Diana must be equidistant from each of her competitors. Now, they did not say the distance from Diana to the competitors is equal. If they would have said that's equal, that means yes, it should be a perpendicular bisector. Here, they did not say that the distance between Diana and her competitor are equal. They only said the competitors to her target is equal. So from the competitor to the target, maybe it's equal, but not from her to the competitor. So it does not need to be a perpendicular bisector of BC. So you can explain it in your own words. So this is how I wanted to write. So you can say it doesn't need to be a perpendicular bisector of which line. It should not be a perpendicular bisector of BC, because if it is, because if so, Diana has to be equidistant from her competitors. So it totally depends on how you want to explain it. The same idea you could explain in your own words, equidistant from her competitors. Okay. Now, if I would put that in a picture, I would say the distance from A to B to A should be equal to distance of A to C. Only then there will be a perpendicular bisector for this, right? Now, if we do not know whether they are really standing in the same length or not, because the question says the distance from the competitor to this is equal. So you can have this equal, but it cannot be a perpendicular bisector unless these two are equal as well. Right, let's move on to the next question. Given that line P is the perpendicular bisector of XZ, so this is XZ, P is the perpendicular bisector. According to the perpendicular bisector now, WX is equal to WZ and XY is congruent to YZ. Now they said XY is 15.5, so XY is 15.5, so you need to find the distance of ZY. So according to the bisector theorem, ZY is also going to be 15.5. So if you have understood the theorem, the whole lesson becomes easy. Given that XZ, so the whole length again is 38. So X to Z is 38. Let me mark it this way, 38. YX is 27, YX is 27, and YZ is 27. Find ZW. So if the whole length is 38, you have to find half of it, because they said this is equal to this, which means automatically this becomes equal to this because of the converse of the bisector theorem. So to find ZW, you just needed to divide that by 2. So 38 divided by 2 would give you 19. So the distance between ZW is going to be 19. Now next one, given that line P, let me erase this thing off. Given that line P is the perpendicular bisector of XZ, XY is 4n, and YZ is 14. You have to find the value of n. So definitely to find the value of n, we need an equation. Now you know by the bisector theorem, this is equal to this. So we could say that 4n equals 14 which means n is going to be equal to 14 divided by 4. So that means n is going to be equal to, this would give you 3.5, right? Yeah, n is going to be 3.5, or if you have written in fractions, it's going to be 7/2 or 3 1.5. All means the same. So n is going to be equal to 3.5. Next question. Given that xy equals zy, so let me show that in the picture for you. Xy equals zy, and wx, where is wx, equals 6 minus 1. Let me erase this also. So xy equals zy, this is equal to this. Wx is 6x minus 1, and xz, the whole length is 10x plus 16. So xz is 10x plus 16. You have to find the length of zw. So now they have given us the length of wx to be 6x minus 1. Now you know in the bisector theorem, if xy is equal to yz, then xw is equal to zw. So this means this is also going to be 6x minus 1. Okay, now there are two ways of solving this. Definitely you need to write an equation to find out this. So first, to find this out, we need to write the equation as 6x plus 1, that's xw, wx, or let me write it in letters first, then you can write it in, you can substitute the values. If I would explain that in words, that's going to be xw, the length of xw, plus zw is going to be equal to the whole length of xz. Right, now if I would substitute the values, what's the value of x plus xw? That's 6x minus 1. So let me put that in parentheses so that nobody will get confused. Then what's the length of zw? Now if xw is 6x minus 1, this is also going to be 6x minus 1. So this is also going to be 6x minus 1 equals xz. That's 10x plus 16. 10x plus 16. Now instead of writing this, you could simply write it as 2 multiplied by 6x minus 1 equals 10x plus 16. Why did I write 2 times 6x plus 1? Because we know the whole length is like 2 times the whole, this each half is going to be 2 times of this. So whether you add this or you multiply this, you're going to get the same expression again. So 6x plus 6x is going to give you 12x. And then minus 1 is going to give you minus 2. So even if you would have written this and you simplify this, that's going to give you the same. 12x minus 2 equals 10x plus 16. Now 12x minus 10x would give you a 2x equals 16 plus 2 is 18. So x is going to be equal to 9. So the value of x is 9. Now you know what's next. You can substitute that in place of 6x minus 1 and find out the length. So let's substitute this. So if you substitute, that's going to be zw is 6x minus 1, which means 6 multiplied by 9 minus 1, which is 54 minus 1, is going to give you a 53. Or if you want, you could even substitute 9 in place of this and then divide it by 2. That would also give you the same answer. So there are many ways of doing it, but the idea needs to be the same. Right, let's move on to the next question. Now this is talking about angle bisector. Whenever you have a figure like this, that means it's an angle bisector. Given that FG is equal to GHG, so this is equal to this, means the angle has been bisected. Angle FEH, that's the complete angle, is 55 degrees. You have to find the measure of angle GEH here this way. You have to find the measure of this angle. So If these two are equal, that means you know angle FEG is congruent to HGG. They both are equal too. If the complete angle is 55, to find out one part, what you need to do? You just need to divide that by 2. So 52 divided by 2 will give you 27.5 degrees. So the measure of angle GEH is going to be 27.5 degrees. Now only you need to decide, like you need to observe whether they have given you the part of the angle or the complete angle. If they are given the complete angle and they are asking for a part, you divide by 2. If they are given you half of the angle, then they are asking for the complete angle, you multiply by 2. Similarly, here also I forgot to tell you that if they are giving you the whole length and asking for half, divide by 2. If they are given half the length and they are asking for the whole length, you have to multiply it by 2. So this is a small tip you could write down anywhere so that it will become easy for you. So given, next question, given that EG, that's EG, is EG bisects FEH and GF is the root of 2. So the length between G to F is the square root of 2. You have to find the length of GH. Well, if FG is the square root of 2, GH is also going to be the square root of 2. So the answer here is going to be the root of 2. That's all. They didn't ask you to do anything else. Next question. Some questions might seem tricky or difficult, but they become the easiest ones. Given that angle FEG, this angle is congruent to angle GEH. So they said this angle is congruent to this angle. If FG, that's the length of FG, is 10Z minus 30. So this is 10Z minus 30. And HG, this length is 7Z plus 6. You have to find the length of FG. So to find FG, we definitely need an equation now. So to write the equation, now the space here is not enough. So I'm solving the question here. So we know if these two angles are congruent, that means these two sides are equal, right? So we could say FG is equal to HG, which means if I would substitute, I'm going to write the values there. 10Z minus 30 is equal to 7Z plus 6. So you just need to simplify them. 10Z minus 7Z is going to give you a 3Z equals 6 plus 30, which is 36. So the value of Z is going to be 12. The question says find the length of FG. So we are going to substitute the value of Z there. FG is 10Z minus 30, which means it's going to be 10 multiplied by 12 minus 30. So 120 minus 30 is going to give you a 90. So the length of FG is going to be 90, which means the length of GH or HG is also going to be 90. The same. For a quick check, you can simply replace 12 here in place of HG. So 7 12s are 84 plus 6 is 90, which means your answer is correct. Then question number 9, given that GF is equal to GH. So GF is equal to GH. Okay, these two are equal. Angle GEF is 8 over 3, 8 degrees. And angle GEH is 24. So this angle is 8 over 3, 8 degrees. And this angle is 24 degrees. You have to find the value of A. So you know that both the angles are congruent. From the converse of the bisector theorem, angle bisector theorem, both these angles are equal. So which means we could say angle GEF is equal to angle GEH, which means 8 over 3A is equal to 24 degrees. What do you need to do? Solve it. A is going to be equal to 24 divided by 8 over 3 because this is multiplied, right? 8 over 3 is multiplied, so we are going to divide it. So that's going to be, you will use definitely KCF. So keep it, change it, flip it. So if you would simplify this, you can simplify this with an 8. 8 ones, 8 threes. So your answer is going to be A equals 9. there are many methods to do. You can do any way you want to. So this is the correct way to do it. So that's how I have done it. If you have got the answer as a equals 9, that means whichever method you have used is correct, right? So this was all about this question. Moving to the last three questions. Well, now here you have to write an equation in point slope form for the perpendicular bisector. Now here I would like to tell you that there are a few steps you needed to follow. First is definitely you need to find the midpoint. So first find the midpoint, and midpoint formula is going to be x plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. So midpoint x1 plus x2 over 2 divided by y1 plus y2 over 2. The second step is to find the slope. So to find the slope, you will use the formula again, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then third, you will write the reciprocal. Reciprocal means the upside down. So for example, if you say the slope was 3, the reciprocal becomes 1 over 3. How did it become 1 over 3? Because, so if you say the slope was 3, the reciprocal will become 1 over 3. How did it become 1 over 3? Because this is written as 3 over 1, so it goes up and down. So if you say the slope was 1, then the reciprocal of that becomes negative 1 over 1. That means it's basically a negative 1. So the sign flips as well as the number flips. That's called as the reciprocal. So even in 3, that becomes negative 1 over 3. Okay, so reciprocal, the sign flips, the number flips, right? So finding the reciprocal, and then the fourth step is to write it in the point slope form. So the point slope form is going to be y minus y1 equals m, that's the slope, x minus x1. So let me show you one how to do, then the rest becomes easier. So before you do anything, just name these as x1, y1, x2, and y2. Right, so first thing first, midpoint. So let's find the midpoint. So to find the midpoint, use the formula x1 plus x2. So that means it's going to be 4 plus minus 2 divided by 2, and y1, that's 0 plus 3 divided by 2. Right, so plus minus will become a minus. So 4 minus 2 is 2 over 2, which is going to give you a 1. 0 plus 3 is 3 divided by 2 is going to give you a 1.5. So the midpoint is 1 and 1.5. Right, moving to the next step, which is the second step, to find the slope. So the first step is done. Second step is to find the slope, y2 minus y1. So it's going to be y2 is 3, right? 3 minus 0, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this is going to be 3 over negative 6, which means if you simplify, you're going to get a negative 1 over 2. Simplify means you're going to cancel this over negative 1 over 2. Now the third step, that's the reciprocal. Reciprocal of negative 1.5 is going to be what? The reciprocal of negative 1.5 is going to be 2 over 1, which means the reciprocal is a 2. Okay, so that means the slope for why we are finding the reciprocal, I forgot to tell you, because we are finding the slope for perpendicular bisectors. If it was for a normal line, the slope will be negative 1 over 2, but for perpendicular bisectors, the slope is going to be the reciprocal of what we find. So that means the reciprocal for this particular line is going to be 1. It's going to be 2. So let's write the formula now in point slope form. The answer in point slope form. So we are going to use the midpoint formula, the midpoint coordinate, and the slope only. So what was the point slope formula? Y. So I leave the y as y. I'm not going to do anything for y. Minus y1. So we consider this to be y1. So y minus 1.5 equals m, that's the slope. So slope is 2 x, I don't write any value for x, but for x1, I replace x1 with a 1. So this is going to be the equation in point slope form. If you would practice, it becomes as easy as eating a piece of cake, but definitely needs practice. Let's try one more question. Okay, before starting anything, write down the coordinates: x1, y1, x2, y2. They both look like y. Okay. Well, you know it's x2, right? So first let's find the midpoint. So to find the midpoint, this is going to be x1, that's 0, plus x2 is 0, divided by 2, then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. That means your midpoint is going to be 0. 0 plus 0 is 0, divided by 2 is 0. Negative 3 plus 1 is going to give you a negative 2, right? Negative 2 divided by 2 is going to be negative 1. So 0, 1 is going to be the midpoint. So the second step is to find the slope. Again, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So minus minus is going to give you a plus. So that means 1 plus 3 is 4 divided by 0. So 4 divided by 0. Okay, now here you know that you cannot divide 4 by 0. It's not possible to divide any number by 0. So when you get something like this, that means definitely now we do need a slope for, but for such questions where we cannot divide anything by 0, we say that the slope here is infinity. So what does that mean by the slope is infinite? That means there is a slope, but it runs through parallel to the y-axis. Well, that you will learn in detail when you go through that next those lessons of slope. But for now, you just remember, if you are dividing any number by 0, that means it cannot be done. That means the slope is going to be an infinite one. So let's keep that as a 0. Right? So now what happens? Now definitely we cannot find the reciprocal of 0. There is no reciprocal for 0. So the next step is only to write the equation in point slope form. So if you are writing that in point slope form, that's going to be y minus minus 1, because minus 1 is from the coordinate and minus is from the equation, equals, now there is nothing to do, so I cannot say here, also here again the x coordinate is a 0, so I simply write it as 0 because there is no slope for this line. The slope is infinite here, so only I solve this part. That means y plus 1 equals 0. So the point slope form for this particular question becomes y plus 1 equals 0. That's all. Right, let's do the last question. So for the last question, again, I think I will remove this. Okay, better let it be there. So let's find the midpoint first. So the midpoint for this is going to be, let me write x1, y1, x2, y2. So x1 plus x2, that's negative 1 plus negative 3 divided by 2. And y1 is 6 plus minus 4 divided by 2. So that's going to give you plus into minus is minus, 1 minus negative 1, negative 3 is negative 4, divided by 2 would give you a negative 2 again. And then again here, it's negative into positive is negative. 6 minus 4 is 2, divided by 2 is going to be 1. So the midpoint is going to be negative 2 and 1. And the next is to find the slope. So to find the slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. x1. So this is going to be a negative 10 over, there's going to be plus, minus, negative, negative is going to give you positive. So negative 3, positive 1 is going to give you a negative 2. All right, so here if you would simplify this, you're going to get 5. So you're going to write the reciprocal of this. So the reciprocal of 5 is going to be, so 5 is usually written as 5 over 1. So the reciprocal is going to be negative because positive becomes negative. and then 1 over 5. The number flips, the sign flips. That's reciprocal. Okay, the final step is to write the point slope form. So point slope form, we'll use the midpoint for coordinates. So that's y, y stays y, minus y1, that's 1, equals the slope, that's negative 1 over 5, x, that's we don't know the value of one of the x's, but x1 we know is negative 2. So negative 2. This negative is from the formula and this negative is from the coordinate. So negative becomes positive. So your answer is going to be rather x plus 2. So that's all. So there are the first part of the lesson was easy. The second part was also easy. We just write the equation in point slope form, but then you just needed to follow these steps. If you're following these steps perfectly, you will get the answer perfectly. So till we meet again in another video, do keep practicing and also do practice well.